Floor Coverings International, often referred to as FCI.
The flooring industry is a $146 billion industry in North America. Our average job size is $8,000. That's what it is.
Before you explore franchise options, take a few minutes to understand how you are wired. The assessment link is below. Welcome to Franchise Focus. Today, we're talking with the most established and recognizable brands in the flooring space, Floor Coverings International, often referred to as FCI. This is a brand that's been around since 1989 and has built a very different model than the traditional flooring store. Instead of relying on expensive retail locations and waiting for customers to walk in, FCI brings the showroom directly to the customer's home through the mobile flooring showroom model. What's interesting is this business sits on the intersection of home services, design sales, and project management while also benefiting from the strong demographic tailwinds tied to remodeling, aging housing stock, etc. So today I'm joined by Chris Shaffer, Senior Director of Franchise Development of FCI. Chris has spent years helping entrepreneurs evaluate franchise ownership and understands what it actually takes to be successful. We're going to talk about the evolution of this brand and the roles of the owners and the realities this could generate for someone that wants to get into business for themselves. So welcome, Chris. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Laura. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So give it a little background about yourself and your entree into franchising and whatnot.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I was just telling somebody this. I didn't make the connection till recently, but my father used to be a hotel manager at the Holiday Inn. I grew up in hotels. I've basically been in franchising since I was like 4. I worked with architects, engineers, and contractors in the private equity world, or wasn't private equity, was purchased. I was let go because my salary became too high and found my way into the franchising side. I ultimately started with an educational childcare daycare facility that did quite well and didn't need to leave. Was approached by Floor Coverings International, and the rest is history. Once I saw the sort of the culture, the everything else that we're going to talk about here, and I think you'll have a pretty good idea as why I decided to join Floor Coverings International.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Floor Coverings International and what makes them different than others and just kind of walking through what that business model looks like.
Sure. No, absolutely. What I know is that, so when I initially joined the franchising world, there were a couple of things that I recently sort of jotted this down. I don't know if I ever actually vocalized it, but sort of, I know I was thinking about it this way. And one of the things that I was looking for when I initially jumped into the franchising side, and I've been doing this for 18 years, was you want to find, and I think we all do, want to try to find something that has evidence of an abundance of demand, something that people have a need in, right? The flooring industry is a $146 billion industry in North America. If I was to take the top 50 flooring companies, of which we're number 5, but combine our revenue together, we don't amount to 10% of the revenue in this industry. So it's very fragmented. There isn't a dominant player. So once you find that abundance of demand, the next question becomes, well, what's the difference that whatever this business is, or in this instance, Floor Coverings International, what's the difference between what we provide and what the industry provides? And what I've come to understand universally is that ultimately, when you're marketing towards the right consumer, then the product really becomes the experience. I don't think there's a question right now in the franchising flooring world. The experience generally isn't really that great of an experience. I think in general, it's one of the most complained about services in all of North America, something like 11 million complaints annually.
Serious.
In contracting in general, right? So flooring
Okay,
being a part
gotcha.
of that.
Yep.
And most of us that I know, if they own their homes and have gone through any sort of home improvement, have a
Yeah,
story
right.
about how something happened. Are you familiar with the term Net Promoter Score?
Yes.
Okay. So the Net Promoter Score is ultimately the consumer's review of something after completion, right? For us, it's after we've gone in and consulted and provided the big, essentially our homeowners to fall in love with their homes once again by placing in new floors as a project. They ranked this from minus 100 to 100 on the consumer scale. Anything over 0 is considered good, which saying out loud just sounds silly to begin. Over 0, it's good, right? So the average Net Promoter Score for a flooring company is something like 27, which is considered good. At Floor Coverings International, our Net Promoter Score is an 87. We are by far the highest rated company in all of North America. And that's because, and this is me finally getting to your question, but that's because we've recognized that our consumer, in this instance, 78% of the time, is not me. It's my wife who tells me what needs to be in my home. I just, frankly, it's the truth. No matter, and I applaud her for allowing me to believe that I have some say in this, but ultimately I don't really. So and the industry isn't simply flat out marketing towards her. Now, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but my wife
Yeah.
allows me to speak for her. She doesn't want to go into a hardware store where somebody's going to tell her what she wants rather than ask her. So we flipped the experience. We focus on providing, for lack of a better term, sort of a boutique experience for that
Right.
consumer. We're going to come in, we're going to take care of all of it. It changes the experience from here's my price, what do you think, to here's the project we discussed. Now, because of that, it demands that we have we're ultimately, it doesn't come down to price when we provide this picture in the proper manner. It's about a service and experience. And again, having someone fall in love with their home. Now, what we do is we took away retail. You don't need to go in and talk to somebody in the plumbing department about the hardwood that you're interested in. We come to the home with the mobile flooring showroom, 3,000 plus samples. You can view in the light of your own home with your own decor and determine this is what the right fit is for me. We provide a second to none customer experience, which is evident in the Net Promoter Score, and we buy directly from the manufacturer. So if we're providing the service properly, it doesn't generally come down to price. What it translates into is higher margin because there's no middleman or middle person for us on this end. So long answer to a short question, but that's
Yeah.
I got to it eventually, I think.
Very, very useful. Um, so you're buying, do you have a warehouse you need to hold this, or how does that work in terms of, the owners, they bid on a job, someone says yes, and then they have to buy the materials? Or do
Yeah,
they
it's a great
drop ship
question.
them to the house?
Sure, it's a great question. So, not necessarily, right? So, we don't, what's important, most important for our franchisees and what the consumer looks for is look, in home improvement world, 95% of the time, if somebody wants something, they're going online first.
Mhm.
So, what's imperative is that we appease Google or whatever the next search engine is. So, while we need some form of commercial address, something that can receive mail and phone calls, that appeases Google so that you show up. That's what's important. Now, depending on the area, yeah, it could be a receiving area. It could be an office space with a desk or two, but it is in 8% of the time, it is not a warehouse. It is not something where we store the materials. Now, we can keep the space small, and generally there's a receiving area if it's doable, right? Where the materials come in and then they're taken to wherever that particular project is, which I think in turn changes the interaction with the consumer because if I don't own inventory, if I owned a pallet of hardwood and I walk into your home, in the back of my mind, I'm saying, well, I'm going to sell you this hardwood. But if I don't have the inventory, well, I don't come in with an agenda. Now it's talk to me about your project. Let's take care of all of it. And the consequences, our average job size is about $2,500 more than the retail side. However, our conversion rate, our success rate on these appointments is in the 46% range. And that's because it's just a different conversation. It's an apples and oranges discussion from here's my price to here's our project.
Right. Okay. So speaking of which, then how are jobs clients obtained? What works? What kind of marketing? What kind of networking? What works for owners?
Sure. Yeah. So I look at marketing as if it was a three-legged stool, right? Each one of these legs is equally important. If I take one away, the chair doesn't work anymore, right? The first component of this is the digital side, if you will, right? Those
Hmm.
folks that go online, that look through whatever some of these portals are, that go through search engine optimization and PPC and whatever else you want to term it. Effectively, we handle that for our franchisees. We do the digital marketing. What that means is that the leads that are supplied are generally appointments. This isn't, hey, call this person. It's they want to see you at 11 a.m. They want to talk to you about the new tile in their kitchen. What we want our franchisees to focus on the other two legs is A, being a part of the community because people buy local, right? So if that means going to the farmers market, if that means sponsoring the Little League baseball team, if that's a part of your local Chamber of Commerce or Business Network International, that's what you do.
Yeah.
And then the other portion of this is the B2B2C side, the business to consumer. There's a significant amount of contractors and businesses that either sub out or refer flooring because they don't do it themselves, whether
Of
it's a
course.
real
Yeah.
estate agent, a restoration company, even kitchen and bath remodelers. So
Yeah. Exactly.
our most sustainable franchisees understand that look, if I get a healthy mix of these three legs, that's the power to build it more of an empire rather than a franchise, because beyond this, and I know I'm giving you a much longer answer than you wanted,
No,
but
it's great.
relationships supersede your territory. You travel with that business. So you can grow this as large as you want when you build those relationships.
Okay, so you own the relationship regardless of where that business is at. Okay.
Correct.
In terms of the owner role, then what does that look like for 6 months versus second 6 months, second year, and on?
Sure. Yeah. No, listen. So this is not someone buying a job. So I want to be clear on this. We consider this an executive business model that you can gain that executive side of this. What we know, and there's more than one path towards success with Floor Coverings International, but those that are willing to gain a bit of accountability and experience and
Hmm.
use that as you scale your business to mentor those individuals that you bring on. And then yes, look, you can render yourself useless, but in a good way. The first 6 months is gaining that accountability. That's you creating consultations, generating revenue. We want you to scale that as soon as possible, which the next step in scaling is adding the next mobile showroom.
Okay.
A franchisee that gets into what we would consider the executive model has ultimately 3 employees. It's 2 design associates or salespeople, 1 office manager, and an owner is that fourth component. But also, there's a formula and a term that we use with our franchisees, and that term is 2 million is the floor. More importantly, 2 million is the standard. It's the median. How soon can our franchisees get to 2 million in revenue and scale beyond this? But
Right.
that formula is 2 design associates, an office manager, and an owner. And
Fantastic.
so ideally, you hit that. That's the executive model. In a historical manner, the formula should come out to a $2 million plus business in
Right.
revenue.
Fantastic. So owners that typically are attracted to this model, is there a certain type of profile or what tends to work well?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had folks say, "Well, I'm not a salesperson." I don't know. I don't think anybody wants to be sold, right? I don't want to be sat there and be sold to. I think what I always find to be most important is it someone that can convey and create rapport to gain that initial experience. But at the end of the day, it's about building the right culture. A huge reason to why I'm a part of Floor Coverings International is because of the culture that's here, but is
Hmm.
most certainly instilled in the franchisees. You hear it all the time. What is it? People leave their job like 85% of the time because not because of their pay, but because of the culture. So it's about building that right culture with a small amount of employees, right? You're talking 3, 4, 5 people in your
Right.
potentially multi-million-dollar side of things. So yes, yeah. Look, can you have a conversation and build a relationship? That's key in the beginning. But building and maintaining that culture and that rapport, I call it co-opetition, right? I have a couple individuals that do what I do. When they're successful, I'm super happy for them. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that should be me. And sometimes that's a good thing. And having
Right.
that sort of co-opetition, it means everybody's going to be successful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So as the owner comes in, they're involved in that sales, and that starts shifting once you hit certain revenues time, and they're more well, they're doing sales and operations at the beginning, right?
So ideally you'll have an office manager and an owner is generally the starting point. Now I
Okay.
used to tell I used to say to folks that look, bank on this person in the beginning, their 3/4 time. Now that used to be a person. And we're an ever evolving franchise, and understanding when franchisees find different paths and ways and things that make potentially lower the overhead and the potential to get to that profitability sooner. And one of those things is there's a lot of third party virtual office managers at this point,
Yeah.
and they do a great job. And it's lowering that overhead. I will tell you the goal of our operations, and this is a dicey way to answer this. And I'm not gonna. There's the Federal Trade Commission has a lot of things in place that I can't say, but the mindset of our operations, and they're incentivized as they work with franchisees directly, is to get them beyond break even within 6 months. That's what they're incentivized on. Now, that's not a number. That's not anything else. Everybody's different, and what that means is if I'm bringing on a virtual office manager before I then bring in that first salesperson, that's a lower amount of overhead that gets me to that point much sooner, and that's huge. That's what everybody, no matter whoever's looking at any aspect of whatever business they want to own, it's when can I make money, and our operations team, and that's their main goal and mindset, and that's how they're incentivized.
How are the floors installed?
We blink. And then they pop it out. So we use contracted floor, independent contractors, 1099 employees. Actually, probably the same ones that you may use at Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever else might be. The
Okay.
difference is in a consumer interaction. If I went to a hardware store and I go to the sales associate and I say I want hardwood, they ask me the size of my room. I tell them it's I want hardwood in my living room. It's 180 square feet. They say, great. Here's what you need to buy. And then I compensate them. They turn around and they do one of two things. They give me a sheet of paper that says, look, here's these time slots. What works for you to have these people install this? Or here's a phone number. These are our installers. Reach out to them, get the appointment set. Now, what the consumer doesn't recognize is on the back end, there's something they call an installation house that brokers with the retailer. The retailer won't talk to the installers. So they broker a price. And so for ease of math, let's say as a homeowner, you pay $5 a square foot. The installer takes $250. The installation house takes $250. Our franchisees, we don't use that installation house. We don't use that middle person. So we immediately have the ability to pay that installer more. We don't hold the money hostage. And the retailers, they're lucky if they get it within 30 days. And so when the job's complete, we're paying the installers. And then, look, if you need to put beer in the fridge on Friday, you put beer in the fridge on Friday. We treat them better. We pay them more. We pay them on time. Now, the real reality of this is that if you have a franchisee, and I'm not going to pick on a painting company, but I'm going to. So let's say you're a painting franchisee that did 2 to 4 million in revenue annually. Because of their job size, you need 10 to 20 painting crews. It's a labor force.
Yeah.
At FCI, because our job size is about 2/3 more than what a typical painting project is, we can have a $2 to $4 million franchisee with 3 main crews and 1 or 2 backups for the busier times. So it's not a labor force. It is pretty clear. You, as a homeowner, if I don't like the project that's completed, I'm not going to turn around and pay you, right? So we do a walkthrough before, in the middle, and in the end with our installers and our homeowners. They know they're not going to get paid if they don't do the job right. And if they're not, there's somebody else who wants to get paid more, paid on time, and treated better. And so we have, obviously, we have 320 franchisees. It's a common question. The installer side, if our franchisees had a top 10 list of concerns, if the installers make it their 9th or 10th, and we figured it out. And it speaks to it on the back end of the Net Promoter Score.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, that makes total sense. So what is often the biggest obstacle for somebody that gets in and all excited, but they may stumble at the beginning? What's typically happening?
I think this is a universal question.
Yes.
Right. And so here's what I know, doing this as long as I had. The way that I've always looked at this is, listen, we're going to have a conversation. You're going to determine that this is the right thing for you. You're going to sign a franchise agreement. You'll pay your franchise fee. You'll then go through the training. You'll do whatever you need to do operationally on the back end. You'll get through everything else to the point where your business opens and you sit back and go, all right, we're good to go. They're going to come to me. And when that happens, that's where the business fails. This doesn't just come to you, right? Anything that is worth any sort of success requires you to put that time in to do so. And if you find something where I could just write a check and I'll make a lot of money, please introduce me, right?
Yes.
And
No, I hear
so
you.
I think that it gets to that point where whatever it is, it's lost in the conversation that, oh, I've got to go do this. Now, once that's figured out, then the path becomes pretty clear. And that's when you can leverage the franchisor, whether it's FCI or not, in terms of the training and everything else, if you believe in on the back end of that. And I think that that's generally that initial stumbling block comes to that. What is it? What did they say? Mike Tyson said that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Right. Sometimes it takes that for you to go, okay, I got to go do this.
And then what have been some of the early wins that have surprised new owners?
Oh, well, I mean, listen, so when those franchisees that are focused on, while they're going through training, of building that community name, joining the networking groups, visiting the restoration company, the property manager, the 3-season room installer, while they're doing this other side and building those relationships up, it becomes a windfall, right? It's okay. Well, I've got some of these appointments set on the digital side, but look what I've got going on the other side. And so, there's a litany of success stories that go beyond my capability of necessarily discussing over this. But if our goal is for employees that includes the owner, and that's the $2 million plus business. The average historically is within about 12 months, you have those four components in place. That's a win in itself. And look, the operations team is fully engaged. They have specific metrics based around proposals and installations, as well as, appointments and everything else. And there's metrics that, the KPIs that fall all across this. So, it seems like I'm dancing around, but I am to some degree because I don't know if I
Well,
can necessarily say the monetary
yeah, no, I understand. I
windfalls.
appreciate that. FCI is a well-run, well-oiled machine. Talk a little bit about that support and what someone's getting when they join a franchise like that.
Course, yeah, and I think as we all know, right? As if you believe in the system, the technology, the training, the everything else, right? You're not reinventing the wheel. That's the awesomeness of franchising, right? You're hitting the ground running. I've always looked at it. Look, let's run downhill. Not only just hit the ground running, but for us, it begins with as soon as someone decides to move forward, we have a startup team that consists of, I think it's 5 or 6 people that
Hmm.
go through a 13 pages of checklists of everything that's being accomplished, even before actually really training beginning. And they're walking you through this. There's a woman on our team that operates via Zoom on 4 to 6 hour windows, and you just pop in and say, "Hey, Savannah, I need help with this today." And she'll say, "All right, well, let's focus on steps 8 through 9." That culminates with interspersed through 3 different trips to our corporate office, which is in Norcross, Georgia, outside of Atlanta. We have an
Hmm.
11,000 square foot training facility there. And it generally, when we have events, we have one going on right now where we have, I think last I heard, it was 78 other franchisees. They're all working together in different stages. So yes, the
Oh,
franchisor is there to support, but there's 75, 76 other brothers and sisters that are of the mindset that, look, if you do well, for the sheer selfish aspect of this, if you do well, it increases the value of my business. So let's all sort of be fat and happy together. So we do an online virtual, what we call boot camp, but it's done virtually. It's not how fast can you run a mile. And we do the 3 different visits there that culminate with the second visit of coming in, concluding this, and you leave. Your business is open. Then you come back 90 days later to reassess and see what's working, what needs to be fixed, and really work on that program. But if you ask our operations team beyond that, there's a 2 year curriculum even after your business is open to continue to support and grow that business. So I think much of what a franchisor, their name is made based on how they support their franchisees. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that does it better than we do.
that's fantastic. What's a common misconception that people think about when they hear flooring?
All right, so we have a few minutes. I'm gonna give you my spiel on this, and it comes back to the net promoter score side of things.
Yeah.
87. It's between an 83 and an 87. It's a week in arrears. There are only so many companies in this world that we recognize as the normal Joe population, which I consider myself to be, that recognize companies that have net promoter scores. So we're in the top quarter of the top 1%. Forget home improvement. The first one is Disney. The second one is Ritz Carlton, and the third is, whether it's polarizing or not, is Tesla. And I'm going somewhere with this, I promise you. When you go, and I don't, it depends on who you are, whether you are that person who watches the Mickey Mouse Club or not. But when you go to Disney, generally, those people, when they're leaving, after they post their pictures on Facebook and whatever else, they're scheduling their next visit to Disney.
Yes. Yes.
When I have several friends that have Teslas, whether you're polarized by it or not, it's somewhat immaterial. But most folks that I know that have a Tesla are looking to buy their next one. I have a friend who just bought one for his wife, and they're looking to buy the truck next, right? If you can afford to stay at the Ritz Carlton, the next time you
Yeah.
travel, why would you stay
No
somewhere
doubt about
else?
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the misconception. Our average job size is $8,000. That's what it is. For most folks, it's not their entire home. On average, actually, it's 2 rooms in a home. Now, if I'm able to provide that 87-ish experience on the net promoter score, then I've earned the right for that residual business. And we have a stat that shows that it's somewhere in the low 80s percentile, that once we complete a project, once our franchisees complete a project, within 90 days, they're calling for the next project of their home. So the biggest misconception, the misnomer I think that flooring has, is that it's, I put in your floors, I'll see you again in 4 to 5 years. But in fact, with my average job size is $8,000 and I do this right, I'm getting residual business out of this, and I'm also earning the right for the referral. And that's
Yes.
key in all of this. So to me, that's by far the biggest misnomer. I recognize I'm not naive enough to think that anybody woke up and said, geez, I want to get into flooring. But when you start looking at this, first off, I know there's no AI that's going to install floors, right?
Right.
And then there's this residual nature of this. If it's done right, if you're providing that high class support that's geared at who our consumer is. I'll get off my soapbox there, but
Yeah, no, fantastic.
that's
Um, and you do all types of flooring. Do you also, I should have looked at this. Do you also redo hardwood floors or do you strictly install?
yeah, it's left up to the look, as you know, in franchising, business decisions are left up to the franchisees. If
Mm-hmm.
they decide to do that, it's a conscious decision on themselves. It's a different installer, if you will, that does that. We've got plenty that do. There's revenue to be made there, but it's a decision on their end.
Yeah, got it. Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know that they have the choice.
Yeah,
Sometimes they just need to think they have the choice, but they'll also find more often people
absolutely.
sometimes prefer just to put down new. As you look over the next 5 to 10 years, where do you see some of the biggest opportunities coming in for franchisees?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. So number one, while we have 320 franchisees, there's still something like 500 open territories across the U.S. That doesn't include Canada, which we have franchisees there as well.
Okay.
So there's still plenty of opportunity to continue to grow. Where I see the next stage with Floor Coverings International, when I work with a homeowner, when I complete the project, they're going to pay for it. When I work with a contractor, when I complete the project, they're generally going to pay 30, 60, 90 days later. There is an avenue, a venue in the commercial side of things that it has been taken advantage by many franchisees, but it's probably the most open avenue for us. So
Okay.
as our franchisees continue to build that revenue stream, then it allows them to start to venture off into that side, and it's untapped. And it comes back to what I said, where those relationships, when I work with the restoration company who subs out all the floors that they install, well, they're not going to just work just in my territory, right? They're going to work all over in the state or in the county or whatever it might be. I
100%.
travel with that, right? So that's the biggest avenue. Now, our territories, they support 3 to 5 mobile showrooms before we even start. So it's already like a multi-unit area. So the first avenue towards expansion is add the next mobile showroom.
Okay.
But from there, then it goes, all right, it's time to get into this B2B2C side of things and really build with those contractors that are out there.
Okay. Wonderful. Anything that you wish people would ask as they're going through the process with you?
Huh, that's an interesting question. Anything I wish people would ask? How about I wish they wouldn't ask? No.
Yeah,
So
that's easier.
I can't necessarily think of anything per se. What I know is that at the end of the day, whomever it is that I'm speaking to, this is not a small decision, right? From whatever avenue or whatever path that you come from to get to the point where you're saying, you know what, it's time for me to do something for myself. And so what I would ask of others is that as they look at this, to give it a moment to understand really what this is and who we are, and where you didn't wake up saying I want to be a flooring person, if it's the right fit for you, you're gonna go to sleep thinking you might be a flooring person. Just be prepared to be open with each other. And I've always played it this way, which is, look, if my job, I work just for Floor Coverings International. I look at myself as a bit of a recruiter. My job is to provide information so that you're comfortable saying yes or no, because either one of those things are the right response.
Yeah,
But ultimately, if we continue conversations, there'll be a point where either you or I determine, hey, this is or isn't the right fit. All I ask is that we're honest with each other and one of us figures this out and let the other person know.
that's perfect. Yep. I don't think you could say it any better than that.
Awesome.
Anything else that you want to bring up that's important to consider when you're looking at getting into franchising or getting
Yeah,
into a
yeah.
home?
I mean, the one thing that I think that is important to note is that we're a publicly traded company. We work independently from our sister companies, but our
Mm-hmm.
sister companies are Paul Davis, CertaPro Painters,
Mm-hmm.
and California Closets. Um, Paul Davis is a $2 billion revenue company annually. California Closets is $1 billion. CertaPro Painters is 800 franchisees. We only have 300 franchisees. We have the path to grow and succeed, and we're not going to sacrifice service and support. But we know where we're taking this. This is not us flying by the seat of our pants here. There's a solid plan, and we're about as bottled up as I think of anything that I've seen in the 18 years that I've done this.
That's fantastic. Are there, and now that you bring up those, are there natural relationships with
Mm.
those other owners that the referral relationships can happen both ways?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? And it comes back to this in the franchising world that business decisions need to be left up to franchisees. Yeah, we can make the
Yeah.
introductions. We can do that. But my thought is, okay, well, listen, if I'm going to work with Paul Davis, that's phenomenal. We can make that introduction. If you guys are established, awesome. But why not also work with Rainbow
Oh,
Restorations? Why not also
100%.
work with Servpro? So, yeah, you need to establish yourself as an owner. We can make those inroads, but why not
Yeah.
get all of it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. This is great, Chris. Appreciate your time.
Of course.
And look forward to keep on connecting with you.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Hang on.